By 2014, America's longest war was entering a new, uncertain phase. The once ambitious vision of nation-building had withered under the weight of corruption, tribal divisions, and exhaustion, both in Afghanistan and at home. President Barack Obama, fulfilling a long-promised pivot, announced the end of combat operations by US and NATO forces. The mission was rebranded as Resolute Support, a training and advisory effort rather than a fighting one. But on the ground, the distinction was blurry. Afghan soldiers and police, now numbering in the hundreds of thousands, were expected to hold their own. Yet without constant American air cover, logistics, and intelligence, their vulnerabilities became quickly apparent. The Taliban, sensing opportunity, began to surge back. They exploited local grievances, rural poverty, and anger toward government corruption. By 2015, large swaths of Helmand and Kunduz provinces had fallen under their influence again. The fall of Kunduz in September 2015 was particularly symbolic, the first time a major city had been taken by the Taliban since 2001. It was a psychological blow, both to the Afghan people and to Washington's narrative that progress was irreversible. American forces, though officially in a support role, were pulled back into combat to help Afghan troops reclaim the city. Back in the United States, the war had faded from the headlines. After more than a decade of sacrifice, many Americans had grown numb to the distant conflict. The rise of ISIS in Iraq and Syria drew both media and military attention away from Afghanistan. Yet, for US soldiers rotating through the dusty bases of Kandahar and Bagram, the war never truly ended. Green-on-blue attacks, incidents where Afghan allies turned their weapons on US troops, sowed distrust within the fragile coalition. The dream of a self-sufficient Afghan state was slipping further away. President Donald Trump, inheriting the war in 2017, oscillated between impatience and escalation. He initially vowed to end America's longest war, but under pressure from the Pentagon and hawkish advisors, he approved a modest troop surge to 14,000 in 2018. His administration shifted strategy toward compelling the Taliban to negotiate rather than outright defeating them. Behind the scenes, US diplomats and Taliban representatives began meeting secretly in Qatar, a quiet acknowledgement that the war was unwinnable by military means alone. Meanwhile, the Taliban's power grew in rural areas, their shadow government expanding in parallel with the official one in Kabul. They controlled taxation, administered justice, and enforced their version of Islamic law. Afghan citizens, caught between corrupt officials and insurgent rule, often chose whichever side provided stability, even if it came with fear. Drone strikes continued, special operations raids persisted, and civilians bore the brunt. Weddings, funerals, and hospitals occasionally became collateral damage, deepening resentment and feeding the insurgency's ranks. By 2020, the Taliban held more territory than at any point since 2001. The US signed the Doha Agreement that year, a deal that promised the withdrawal of American troops in exchange for Taliban guarantees not to harbor terrorists. For many Americans, it seemed like a long overdue step toward ending an endless war. But in Afghanistan, there was unease. The deal excluded the Afghan government from key negotiations, leaving it weakened and isolated. The stage was set for a final, chaotic act. The drawdown years were marked by paradox. America had spent billions to build an Afghan state that could not stand on its own. Thousands of lives were lost after the end of the war had already been declared. For soldiers and families back home, questions lingered. What had all the sacrifice achieved? What would happen once the last plane left Bagram? In the quiet valleys of Helmand and the bustling streets of Kabul, the answers were beginning to take shape, and they would soon come crashing down.